Hello, everyone, and welcome to our World Rewilding Day webinar, brought to you by Urban Wilding Hub on the topic of wilder cities. So before we jump into our really quite inspiring presentations, I want to open just by talking about why now is really the time to be thinking about and pushing forward with rewilding within cities. So cities, as we know, face many, many challenges. And over the last couple of years, we've all felt the changing climate and more extreme weather and difficult weather in our cities. Biodiversity loss is always moving in the wrong direction, the biodiversity trends of decline, obviously inside and outside of cities. But for urban residents, what this means is problems with nature disconnection. Many of us living in cities don't have opportunities on a daily basis to have that meaningful experiences and connection with nature. And we know from lots of research that this is detrimental to our physical and our mental health. And it's also fair to say that the kind of typical green spaces that we have in cities that we've had for the last sort of century or more, kind of manicured, highly designed, highly managed and controlled spaces are not really serving us anymore. So we know that these kind of typical park landscapes are quite low in biodiversity generally. They're also as we're seeing, not particularly resilient to our extreme weather that we're getting more and more of. This is a park near me that is burned to a crisp last summer after a month of hot weather, which is a sight I'm sure is familiar to a lot of you as well. And the thing is, we actually spend a lot of money and a lot of time and chemicals making our landscapes in this way that's not serving us anymore. So we're constantly exerting control to try and beat back natural processes and to keep our nature in cities looking the way we think it should look, and really stopping it doing, the natural things that nature does. So rewilding really offers us a different kind of philosophy, a different paradigm for how we might design and manage and live alongside nature within cities. We all know the rewilding visions and the projects that are happening in rural parts of Europe and across the world. And we know the sort of large-scale landscapes like Yosemite National Park and the Scottish Highlands and the Danube Delta that are really showing how rewilding principles can work on this large scale. But what does it mean when we bring it into much smaller spaces that have are much more, in a way, artificial and are surrounded by people within cities? Well, we have lots of opportunities to really think about these rewilding principles. We can start by just giving up an element of control, allowing vegetation to grow, allowing trees and plants to reproduce naturally as they would in wilder spaces. We can also take a more active approach and actually work to establish habitats and semi-natural spaces, depaving our cities, bringing back the woodlands and the meadows that have been lost over the centuries, taking rivers out of concrete channels and bringing the water back onto the land, as we see in the picture here on the bottom left. And perhaps most excitingly, we can start to bring back the lost species, the species that went locally extinct or have been under threat over the last couple of centuries, and really show how we can live alongside them in and around cities, and the kind of benefits that having these animals living alongside us can bring in terms of beavers providing flood resilience in cities, in terms of having large herbivores manage our grasslands, and even having species that have been long missing from our landscapes, like the amazing white stork here, living back in cities once again. And if we can learn to, nurture and live alongside and tolerate these natural processes and this messiness of nature and this unpredictability of nature at times, then we can really reap a lot of benefits from this in terms of having a buffer in cities against the difficulties of climate change. Mentioned about flood resilience, but also dealing with heat waves and having that resilience in our landscape, about reconnecting residents back to truly wild forms of nature and more kinds of wildlife than most people would really experience in cities, and ultimately providing important safe havens and stepping stones for wildlife. So at Urban Wilding Hub, we are committed to this, and we're working to actually mainstream this idea of urban wilding, as we call it. We're doing this mainly through two programs. So we have our Wilding Partners program, which is a community of wilding practitioners, researchers, and community groups who come together on a monthly basis to share knowledge and ultimately to get more urban wilding projects happening on the ground. Two of our wilding partners are presenting today. So we have London Wildlife Trust and Whole Wild World. But we have, I think, almost 50 or about 50 partners now, and that's growing every month, which is fantastic. And we are also crowdsourcing the first map of urban wilding projects across Europe. So we don't know how many there is yet, but we have an idea that there's a lot more than any of us realize. And as you can see, we've been growing this map over the last few months. We have quite a lot in London and England. We know there's a lot more happening on continental Europe. So if any of you are aware of projects or are leading projects, you can jump over to our website and add that in a couple of minutes. This is a great resource as we can start to amplify what's happening more and more. So I'll share links to our work after the presentations and in a follow-up email. But for now, we're gonna move straight into talking about the actual projects and how cities are becoming wilder. So I'll pass over to our first speaker, which is Chris Fitch, who is author of the book Wild Cities. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Ross. Hope everyone can hear me okay. That's a great introduction, and yeah, nicely. I'm just going to share my screen. Nicely goes with what I will be talking about, which is just a quick skim kind of around the world to various places that I was lucky enough to visit, where there's sort of various inspiring activities happening, little projects, before we hear about some of the things that are happening nowadays. Right. So just a real quick version of what I've been doing. So this is my favorite planet. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's really nice. It's full of people and places, infrastructure, cities. It can get quite busy and noisy sometimes. But the good news is that there's lots of cities around the world, urban environments, which are a lot greener and more ecological. And that's good. So thank you, everyone. No, so we take the slightly longer explanation. Just briefly who I am. So yes, my name is Chris Fitch. I'm a science and travel writer. I worked for many years for the Geographical magazine, which is from the Royal Geographical Society, and I've written for National Geographic and some other big media titles like this. I did a few books which are all kind of related to geography and science and kind of getting to know the world a bit more and sort of understanding our place in it. And I got particularly interested then in kind of urban ecology because there was a time a few years ago when I lived somewhere where this was my view outside of my bedroom window. And there was a lot that I loved about living, that I still do, about living in cities. You know, I love the energy and I love the diversity of people from all around the world and all the different, you know, cultures and ideas that they bring. But I found myself looking at this every day going, this can't be right. You know, what I want is something more like this. This is what I want in my life while living in the city. And I'm not going to go into great depth because I'm sure most people on this call are aware of, you know, the importance of nature, you know, the biophilia theory of the impact on our physical and mental health. Yes, I wanted something a lot less like this and a lot more like this. And I found myself thinking, well, it's not just me that this applies to, because you can look at population growth in the world, but really it's the rural population is sort of flatlining. When we talk about population growth, we're talking about people in cities. There's more and more people going into cities. You can look all around the world, and the last 100 years or so, it's been a similar story of countries urbanizing. And then if you throw it forward, we can see that actually it's likely that the number of people living in rural areas is going to go down. But by the middle of the century, there's going to be a huge number of people living in cities. So I found myself thinking, okay, nature is important for people. Most people are in cities. So how do we make cities be more natural, with all the benefits that we know about. And so I kind of looked at the world and I picked out a bunch of cities where I thought there's interesting stories here. And there's something that I want to share, what they're doing. And that led to my book, Wild Cities, which I brought out last year and had a lot of fun publicizing. And Ross was kind enough to have me on his podcast. And then next month, the paperback will be coming out. So well, I'm just going to share now a few stories from the experience I had of spending a few years traveling around and learning about different parts of the world where there's various exciting and cool and inspiring actions taking place. I'm going to start just by looking at where I am today, which is Lisbon, Portugal. I don't know how familiar people on the call are with Lisbon, but if you look at the map overhead, you can see slightly off center there, there's a very large green area, the Parque Florestal de Monsanto, or the Monsanto Forest Park, which takes up a huge amount of land, you know, in the center of a European capital city. If you were to look about 100 years ago, first, obviously, it'd be a lot less urbanized, but also if you can see kind of the hills in the background there, it's fairly barren, arid, not a lot going on. And I haven't quite had the chance to get out and take a photo kind of from the exact same spot to compare. That's definitely on my to-do list. But it's something like this, that from the more recent photo, you can see trees, you can see there is an actual forest up there. Obviously, this is very large scale, and we'll talk, I'm sure, at length about you know, the difference between forestation nowadays. Sorry about that. Forestation nowadays in the 21st century and how it would have been 100 years ago. But yes, in the 1930s, they were able to get out onto this land and start planting trees. Interesting thing, if there's any Formula One fans, in the 1950s, they were actually held some Formula One races in what you can see perhaps behind the car there as sort of some early growing trees. And if you go up there now, I mean, it's a forest. It's 90 plus years of a mix of, you know, fast growing invasive species that were thrown in, like eucalyptus, which has all its own problems, but also native species that have taken over, and it's now a huge part of the city centre. A few examples that went in my book is something similar that you would find in Tokyo, Japan, which 100 years ago created the Meiji Jingu. It was about creating this shrine. So in the the aerial image, you can see there in the very center, there's a sacred Shinto shrine for the emperor who had passed away. It was considered important for this shrine to be in a natural place. They wanted it to be in the new capital of Tokyo. And so all these trees were brought from around Japan and planted to sort of like quickly produce this big urban forest. And then in the 100 years since then, a lot of those original species have kind of died away, and they've been replaced by these slow growing broad-leaved species which are native to the local environment. And so you can see how, you know, now that you've got huge trees overhead, surrounded by, you know, one of the biggest cities in the world. Slightly different type. I mean, if we're talking about rewilding, it's not just vegetation, of course. This is from Nairobi, Kenya, which is quite a weird look at rewilding, because for people who don't know, there's actually a national park inside the city of Nairobi, and in there you will find giraffe and zebra and hippos and lions, and there is a wall to separate them from the city itself. And it's interesting when we think about how much, if we think about animals in the city, how much do we want them to mingle with the population of humans? I understand that what they do in Nairobi is very different, but I think it works quite well because it builds a relationship between the people who live in the city, but between the animals and the people who live in the city. So there is some sort of day-to-day contact. But you have these special corridors so that animals can migrate in and out, and it actually works ecologically. They're not getting isolated. So it's certainly an interesting example to think about. And this was created originally as a hunting park, and then sort of post World War II, it became, okay, let's use this for conservation. So again, these places with interesting history that can contribute to the more modern 21st century conversations about urban rewilding. One that I had to go visit and is always mentioned is Singapore, and I was looking specifically at kind of green walls, green roofs, and the benefits that they bring to especially a country which Singapore, right on the equator, super hot, huge amounts of energy and money is used on cooling these big glass buildings down, or you could just put some nature on it. And a lot of these places, these buildings then barely have to use air conditioning, and of course it brings all the benefits that we've already discussed. The skyscraper there, yes, okay, it's a private sort of luxury hotel and office complex, and you know, there's a conversation that we can have about gentrification and sort of how widely shared that is. But the building on the right is essentially public housing. I mean, it is housing, but also you've got shops, you've got a school, you've got nursery. It's a community building, and there's no reason why these same principles can't be applied to a building like that. As you can see, I'm just sort of skimming around some examples in my book now. This is one of the examples that most made me want to write the book, which is Wellington in New Zealand. The bird you can see there is a tui, which for decades, if not a century, would have been completely extinct in the region. But I took this photo. It's basically outside the Parliament building. I mean, it's as city centre as you can possibly get, because there's loads of them now, and it all comes from the fence you can see there on the right. That there was this bird sanctuary created in the late 90s called Zealandia, which gave a lot of native birds a safe place to breed and to build up their populations without getting destroyed by invasive mammals like stoats and rats and all these creatures that didn't belong there and were brought over by the European ships. And now they have this, that they have built up such a population inside the safe space that now you can find them throughout the city. It's an incredible story. And just before I finish, just to briefly look at the urban marine environment as well. This is in Sydney, where you can see on one side is what they call living seawalls, which is sort of specialized seawalls, which have little crevices and special designs to mimic kind of rock pools to actually create habitats for the real baseline of the ecosystem there just offshore to be able to build up. And from that, you can create a sort of healthy marine ecosystem, even though at least half of the coastline has been turned into seawalls or sort of manipulated in some way. And the other photo on the right is a very small but hugely biodiverse sort of mini little urban marine park called Cabbage Tree Bay, which, you know, you can swim around in there, and there's fish and there's stingrays and you know, an incredible variety of life, and you are right next to the city. So that's an important thing to think about in for all those cities around the world which happen to be on the coastline. Thank you everyone for listening to me. That was a real whirlwind of examples that were featured in my book. I'm really excited to hear what everyone else has got to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's a fantastic overview, world tour of urban wilding projects. And now we're going to zoom in to one city, which is London. And I'm going to pass over to Amelia and Layla. So yeah, from London Wildlife Trust. So yeah, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ross, and thank you, Chris. That was a super interesting talk. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about what we're up to in London. So let me just share my screen. How's that looking for everyone? I can't see, so
Yeah,
some verbal word confirmation. Is that all good? Perfect. Okay, brilliant. So today Layla and I are going to be talking a little bit about rewilding in London. So Layla is our Senior Species Recovery Officer and I'm the Nature Recovery Programmes Officer. And I'm going to start just by giving a little overview of nature recovery in London. And then both Layla and I will share some more about some of our flagship rewilding programmes that capture rewilding within that. So I think it's fair to say that London is equal parts a very interesting and a very challenging environment to work in nature recovery. So we have very high populations, which leads to intense housing and development pressure, and therefore demand for land is very high and very, very competitive. London is also made up of very small land parcels that mean that many landowners exist in small areas, and that makes large-scale nature recovery and connectivity of habitats quite complex. But that said, there's also great opportunities here to connect the high number of residents with local nature sites, and also to demonstrate how high-density urban areas can still protect and advocate for nature in planning systems. So despite the challenges that I've just highlighted, London is one of the greenest cities in Europe, with over 50% of London consisting of green and blue spaces. But just to caveat that figure does include like private gardens and golf courses and kind of poorly managed areas. For example, London's rivers are famously very polluted, but I still think it shows kind of the ample opportunities that we have for nature recovery within the capital. Also worth noting that in 2019, London was awarded as the first national park city. And this is in recognition of the long-term and large-scale ambition of nature recovery in London. And we also have really strong political commitments to nature recovery. So the current mayor of London has invested roughly £30 million towards green infrastructure since he came into post in 2016. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's lots of opportunities for nature recovery here. So where does the trust come in? So London Wildlife Trust, or the Trust, has been advocating for nature in London since 1981. And our approach has changed throughout that time to reflect, environmental and political changes. But today our approach to nature recovery is grounded in 3 principles, and that is better. So enhancing the quality of existing areas and green spaces and restoring degraded areas. The second is bigger, so expanding existing sites, and that's particularly to ensure kind of buffer zones to give the most protection to habitats. And the third is more and joined up, so increasing the net amount of good quality habitats available and connecting those areas by establishing corridors and stepping stones. So you might be thinking, what better approach to champion nature recovery embedding these 3 principles than rewilding? And that is exactly what we thought at London Wildlife Trust. And that led to the heart of our presentation today, where we're going to share a little bit about 2 of our flagship nature recovery programs, which use rewilding to achieve nature recovery. So these are our large-scale urban rewilding pilots, which I'll speak to now, and then I'll pass over to Layla, who leads on our species recovery programs and some very exciting emerging work in that field. So first of all, framing rewilding in London. So I think it's fair to say that rewilding has really captured the public imagination, and it's fast becoming a globally recognised approach to landscape scale nature recovery in the face of dual biodiversity and climate crises. However, at least in the UK, rewilding traditionally has been limited to expansive areas of rural land, where population density is low and there tends to be one or very few landowners. And as we've established, those are not the conditions that we're working with in London. So the first question we really had to address was, how can we define and how can we deliver rewilding that's appropriate for high density urban areas? And that is where the London Rewilding Task Force came in. So to answer this question, the Mayor of London established the London Rewilding Task Force in 2021. And this was a group of national experts, and London Wildlife Trust were included in this. And the group were convened to firstly define rewilding for London, and secondly, to investigate opportunities where large-scale urban rewilding could be possible within the capital. So to start off, it was recognised by the task force that there were many definitions of rewilding already in circulation, and it was decided to take this definition from Rewilding Britain as a baseline. So this defines rewilding as an activity that seeks to reinstate natural processes and, where appropriate, missing species, allowing nature to shape the landscape to provide wider benefits for people. So this was kind of used as a baseline, and the task force adapted this to be more appropriate for an urban context such as London. And this is where they introduced the idea of rewilding as a spectrum. So this is the idea that rewilding can take many different sizes, and that means from small scale urban greening activities such as green roofs to kind of this mid-scale stage, which can act as stepping stone sites, and then all the way to the other end, which is large-scale rewilding, which in the urban context was defined as 100 hectares. And to help conceptualize that, that's about 140 football pitches. And for comparison, previously Rewilding Britain, with the definition I showed on the last slide, we're looking at kind of 500 hectares. So it's really demonstrating kind of the nuance of the definition of rewilding applied in kind of rural versus urban contexts. And then the next step for the task force was to find a way to put that definition in a way that could be applied practically for London. So using that definition and the spectrum as a base, the task force came up with several parameters that could be applied to London to help identify core areas for urban rewilding. So these were size, so the scale of 100 hectares that we've just talked about. Second was core areas with minimal physical constraints within that 100 hectares for connectivity. The third is having low landowner resolution, but high willingness. The third are environmental. The fourth, the environmental opportunities and outcomes. The fifth, reintroduction of ecologically beneficial species. And finally, long-term benefits, and that's both for communities, for local economies, as well as for nature. So the task force took these parameters and applied it to London and came out with 11 areas identified as opportunity sites for large-scale urban rewilding. And more information is given about this methodology and outcomes on the London Rewilding Task Force report, which is available online for anyone wanting to find out more about that. But the key recommendation from this report was to go ahead and kind of further investigate these 11 areas and identify one or more that could be taken forward as an official pilot for delivery of rewilding in London. And this is where the trust comes in. So in 2024, we were appointed by the Mayor's office to take forward an official London rewilding pilot in partnership with the Greater London Authority, who are the regional planning authority for London. And to help us with this, the London Rewilding Action Group was convened. So this was chaired by London Wildlife Trust and the Greater London Authority, whose logos you can see in the middle there, but was supported by this amazing collection of organisations who are regional experts in London across different sectors. So this really ensured that the next steps to the approach were continued to be evidence-led and were also just grounded in best practice. So where are we now? So between 2024 and 2025, we conducted further feasibility of those 11 areas and selected 2 areas to take forward as official pilot zones. We're now beginning phase 2, so trying to secure those landowner partnerships before we have any formal announcement of where those pilots are going to take place. So do stay tuned. We're hoping to announce that later this year. And once we've kind of finalized that, we'll go into development of master planning, ensuring that community are engaged and involved right from the start, and exploring sustainable finance to ensure kind of longevity of resource allocation to these areas. And then we're hoping from 2008, we'll get into the exciting stuff, the delivery. So this will be various kind of species reintroductions, habitat recovery, river restoration, and fundamentally ensuring communities are at the heart of that, and community stewardship opportunities are really integral to that too. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour to what we've been involved in, and I'm going to pass over to Layla now, who will talk about our exciting species reintroduction programme.
Rewilding East London is an urban species recovery initiative, and it's led by us at the London Wildlife Trust, and we're collaborating with the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, and we're supported by the Mayor of London. And we're specifically focusing on reintroducing 2 native species to Britain, the white stork and Eurasian beaver, and we're seeing species reintroduction as one part of the larger kind of rewilding toolkit. Next slide, please, Amelia. So it's a little bit small for everyone, but it's okay. On the left, you can see where we sit in a London context. So that little pinpoint shows where we are based in East London at East Brookend Country Park. And on the right, you can see East Brookend Country Park and the connecting Chase Nature Reserve. And within East Brookend Country Park, that kind of yellow brownish blob at the top is where the beaver enclosure is going to be. And the one below that is where the stork aviary is being built. Next slide, please. So why East Brookend? East Brookend and the Chase Local Nature Reserve are part of the London Greenbelt, and they have SINC status, which is a site of importance for nature recovery. And it's an invaluable landscape for wildlife, such as birds and insects and invertebrates, who all use the wetland and dry acid grassland for habitat. Thames 21 are an organisation that have done significant wetland restoration, connecting the site's floodplain to the River Rhum and improving the wetland, which has created more foraging source for when the stork are wild birds. East Brookend is accessible from central London via train. It has all the social infrastructure. It has a classroom, a cafe, toilets, interpretation, signage, and an on-site team. So it provides us the perfect opportunity to deliver an urban species recovery project with the community at the centre of it, and will add to the inspiring examples of how species recovery and community access can coexist. Especially because we're especially interested in the fact that the borough have a particularly young demographic, and we know that where we can provide opportunities to connect young people to nature, we can create lifelong connections and encourage more action for nature. Next slide, please, Amelia. So you might ask, why stork and beaver? Next slide, please. And if you've ever been anywhere where there are a lot of stork, you might feel like you've traveled a little bit back in time. They look kind of prehistoric. I think they're really cool. You can see they're quite distinctive. They stand about 3 foot tall, and they have a 2-meter wingspan and these bright orange beaks and legs with these black eyes and black wingtips. And they're part of British natural heritage. And up until their recent successful reintroduction down in the south of England, they'd stopped breeding in Britain about 600 years ago due to persecution and habitat loss. And as well as being part of our natural heritage, they're a significant character in folklore. They're famously known for delivering babies, which makes them a symbol of fertility and hope and new beginnings. And across Europe, we can see that they live alongside people in rural and urban habitats. They're quite opportunistic feeders. They'll eat invertebrates, amphibians, even small mammals. And they have these huge stick nests, which they'll build on top of tall trees, but also buildings and cathedrals, anywhere that will hold them. And they can also serve as a bit of a space for much smaller birds to nest too. Next slide, please. Why we can bring storks to East Brookend is because of the improved wetland, and they will hopefully serve as a bit of an umbrella species, encouraging conservationists within the foraging radius and along their migration route to indirectly protect a whole range of other habitats and species due to the stork's presence. The white stork is a symbol of hope, and in a few years, when we have a population of white storks that call East London home, it will demonstrate that urban species recovery is possible, and it will also, of course, provide a tangible opportunity for people to get directly involved in ecological recovery. Next slide, please. Here we have the Eurasian beaver. Turns out not many people have actually seen beavers. I haven't either, because they're pretty elusive. But they're one of 2 types of beaver in the world, and they're the second largest rodent after a capybara. And until their recent reintroductions, they had been extinct in the UK since the 1600s, as they were hunted for their fur, their meat, and their castoreum, which is a scent gland that is used to flavour vanilla. And you can see they have these really awesome adaptations to live in water. So they have this waterproof fur, they have webbed feet and a paddle-shaped tail. And their teeth are this bright orange colour, not because they don't brush them, but because they're enriched with iron. So it kind of makes them the strongest teeth in the animal kingdom, and it means that they can bite into trees and eat that kind of inside layer just under the outer bark. And when they do that, they fell the trees, but they do something called coppicing, which is where you fell a tree and you leave it alive to resprout, and it adds a lot of structure to a woodland. They also have the instinct to dam. This is because they feel more comfortable protecting themselves in larger water bodies, so they still think wolves are out to get them. In some parts of the world they are, but in the UK we don't have any wolves. But they'll create these dams and large bodies of water for safety, and it slows the flow of water, it creates wetlands often, and it filters water and improves that water quality, which as a result the biodiversity in that area blooms, and which is why beavers are often called ecosystem engineers. Next slide, please. So our beavers at East Brookend will be released into an enclosure that surrounds 6.5 hectares of open lake. The enclosure will be completely accessible to the public, so people can still walk around the lakes and kind of see what the beavers have been up to, maybe if they're lucky spotted beaver. It'll have self-shutting doors that will keep the beaver safe and inside, but because the lakes are ground fed, there's no incoming or outgoing water. We don't expect to see any damming behaviours. What we do expect to see is them creating more varied habitat along the edges of the lakes, increasing the amount of deadwood, structural diversity, and opening up more light for the understory vegetation, as well as creating, of course, more opportunities for people to get involved in nature recovery through witnessing, volunteering, and studying this changing habitat. Next slide, please. So here is a little bit of a timeline of the reintroductions that we're doing. So just a quick note to say that all the reintroductions are following the IUCN guidelines and using Natural England's licensing requirements. And we're also working closely with the Derek Gow Consultancy and the Beaver Trust, experts on stork and beaver reintroductions. So from day one, when we release the beavers, which will be March 2027, this time next year, we're expecting to see and measure the changes in the impact kind of that the beavers are making on the lakes. The timeline for the storks is a bit extended. It'll be over several years. This is because in order to have wild storks that are loyal to London and call it home, we have to hatch and raise a generation of birds, because storks have this innate pull to, after their migration, return to the site that they were hatched in order to create their nests and breed. So it will take several years, but after we have the first generation born, we will open up the aviary and they will migrate and hopefully return because they know it's their home. And at every stage of the process, it's an opportunity for people to get involved and connected to these kind of incredible species. Next slide, please. Cool. So alongside these kind of key milestones, community engagement will be taking place, and it will be at the heart of the project, from working with stakeholders who use the site, and I'm currently mapping the whole area, connecting with scientists and social scientists who are interested in using the project for their research and for their studies, planning regular drop-ins and surveys to gather people's opinions, address some of their worries and inform them about the project and the impact that these species will have, through to doing guided walks, local school sessions, practical conservation, animal husbandry. There's lots of volunteers and community members that are already getting involved. So it's really exciting to be able to connect with the local community at kind of every step of the way. Next slide, please. So that was a quick overview of the projects that Amelia and I are lucky enough to be part of. The overall mission at the Trust is nature recovery for a thriving city, and we see rewilding as an important part of the mix to boost the nature recovery projects that we have. As rewilding is in its infancy, we're really excited to be part of shaping what that definition of rewilding means in an urban context and to be contributing to building a more ecologically healthy and resilient capital city. Please do reach out to Amelia and I. Our emails are there on the slide. Share your thoughts, tell us what you think, offer some advice. We're really keen to be kind of involved in this like knowledge sharing and learning from all the other incredible projects that are happening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Layla and Amelia. Fantastic, super inspiring to see what's happening in London and that there's long-term strategy for this across the city. We're running slightly behind time, so apologies if we have not very much time for Q&A, but I think all the clapping hands tell us that it's probably worth it to get all these presentations in. Pass over to our final speaker. We're going to zoom down another layer and look at some smaller scale rewilding work here from Whole Wild World. I'll pass over to you, Jessica, to introduce yourself and your work.
Thanks, Ross. I'm just going to share and check that it's all working. Okay. I'm using Canva here. So. Right, I can't see you. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Russ, for inviting me. It's great to be here. And thank you for everyone that's spoken today. It's been fascinating to hear what's happening. And I'm excited to see beavers returning to London, and always good to see them. Okay, so today I'm going to share some information, presentation on Urban to Rewild. It's a new initiative from the Whole Wide World. So we are working with smaller forests and using those as gateways to the wild. So basically, we're looking at using mini forests within urban areas as connections, connecting people as bridges, basically, to larger rewilding spaces. So the Whole Wide World has been working in Portugal. We've been working in areas that are a bit larger, so sort of medium-size rewilding projects. But living in Gibraltar, I found that really people don't understand what rewilding is. So one of the things that we've been doing within the city area is trying to raise awareness of the importance of the larger rewilding areas, helping people to understand what rewilding is and why it's so important, but also, as has been mentioned in the other talks today, how important it is that we reconnect people in urban areas to nature. So as Chris and everyone has mentioned, urban areas, you know, it's a variety. We do have some urban areas that are really moving towards a sort of eco-regeneration and a much greener space, but a lot of our inner city areas are still quite bleak. If anyone's been to Gibraltar, it's a real combination between sort of the Upper Rock Nature Reserve, but there's also quite heavy traffic, a lot of tourism, a lot of shipping. So it's really a bit of a combination, and any green space really helps those areas in many ways. So yeah, working with mini forests, as I'd sort of said before, we weren't really sure whether mini forests, the Miyawaki way, would really work within Mediterranean areas, but we thought we'd give it a go. We spoke to Lisbon University, who set one up in 2020. We went over to visit. I've got a short video that I'll play for you later, hopefully, if the internet allows me to. But really looking at how these tiny spaces, it's more about communities being involved in creating them, in planting them, using that connectivity to make people, you know, take ownership of these wild spaces. So urban to rewild, the idea is quite simple. It's basically using these native microforests, using them as outdoor classrooms for local schools where school children come and plant. We use them as community art spaces, so using nature arts to really connect people and communities to the spaces. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not just the planting and then leave it to grow. It's really kind of working with it as it grows as well, in quite an organic way. But We used Gibraltar, as I said, as the first sort of blueprint for this. Mini forests are propping up all over the world. There's a lot of communities working with mini forests. They're very easy things to create. You're planting very close planting and using the Miyawaki way. And these forests will you really quite impactful. After 2 to 3 years, you really start to see the difference. This area that we were using in Gibraltar, it was a green space already, but it was lawn, which is very water heavy. You need to be watering that regularly. So we're working with the local government and the environmental departments so that we can help to reduce that water usage. Obviously, in the Mediterranean area during summer months, that can be quite heavy, or you end up with very dry grass and not very attractive environment. Having been to Lisbon and seen the difference in 6 years of growth, it's really quite impactful. And for communities to be involved in that and to see the change and the difference, huge reduction in temperature as well during the summer months, reduction in pollution and various other things. So we've been working with the University of Gibraltar as well to ensure that those metrics are measured year on year, so we can see the impacts. We're also working with local schools and communities that will hopefully be monitoring as well through citizen science, through iNaturalist and various other ways. I think one of the really important aspects is that sort of ongoing care. We have a volunteer structure as well to make sure that people are connected to that space. One of the important things of Urban to Rewild is making sure that those spaces then connect to the wider spaces. So we have the nature reserve in Gibraltar, which has its own sort of rewilding on a 200 hectare area initiative, where there have been species that have been replenished and increased there. So there has been active rewilding going on. We can draw attention to that through infographics. We're working with an illustrator who has done some fantastic work for Rewild and other entities. The idea then is that people come to the forest, the visitors come, and through QR codes they can visit the Upper Rock Nature Reserve, or they can visit nearby Rewilding Spain or Rewilding Portugal and just learn a bit more about how important the wider rewilding projects are for the future of our planet. So through connecting through urban areas and urban green spaces, they are having this impact of raising awareness beyond into the wild. Okay, this is a video. I'm not sure it's going to play.
I can see some music, some movement.
Is it moving? No, it's not really moving. No, it's a whole video. Okay, I'm going to go forwards then. I'm going to but that was just to illustrate the sort of, you could really sort of feel the difference. This was a space, it's about 300 square meters in Lisbon University, so you can visit through that. And that was a very similar kind of green space, but it was lawn. And just in a matter of years, it's grown into a proper sort of Mediterranean feeding forest. So, yeah. Another really important aspect is art and culture. So drawing in more of the community members. So the idea is for these spaces to really cover many different cultural aspects, and so art is a fantastic way of bringing people into that space. This is a totem pole kind of thing that I found in Zambia on a recent trip. We've actually got a carver coming to do this in Gibraltar. We've also been working with Mosaic, a local designer, an artist that does mosaic benches. So one of our other aspects is Seats of Hope. That's something that we brought in with a local mental health charity. So it's working with a lot of different community members. So when we're working with these mini forests. We're working with local partners. So we have the Gibraltar Horticultural Society that we're working with. They are the experts in planting, and they help connect the community members as well. So it's becomes a sort of holistic effort, really. Obviously the infographics tie in with that as well. Corporates, that's something that really is important in urban areas, because as I pointed out at a recent conference, that these corporates are really the future of our cities, because they are the ones creating cities. So when we're working with corporates, it's not just to gain the funding for the forests, it's really to connect their staff and their people into the work that we're doing and become stewards of that forest, and even spend their lunch times there, and gets them out of the office. And most corporates these days do give their staff a bit of time, but it's through that activity that we really start to change minds and to get people to really invest in more than just financially into movements to do with rewilding. So through that work with an urban forest, they learn about the wider rewilding projects that we have going on outside. Because I think one of the things is that people don't really connect to these rewilding areas unless they happen to be interested in nature specifically. This work will draw in a lot more of our urban inhabitants to understand and back the work that we're doing in city, outside city areas. Science of impact, I spoke already about that, the massive impacts that can be had in city areas, the difference that it makes to well-being, mental health, but also temperature and pollution, and the increase in biodiversity in these areas.
Sorry, Jessica, we're just to give you a sort of 1 or 2 minute warning.
We're good, we're good.
Thanks.
Okay. I just wanted to mention quickly, we've got a new partnership brewing. Hopefully for this year, we'll be planting with Treescape Planet Organisation in Uganda. I think 1 or 2 of them are online now with us. So we've got a mini forest in Entebbe coming, which is a fantastic site. We've got up to 5,000 meters squared to work with. So we've got some great ideas for that. And this really becomes the sort of gateway to introduce school children and urban dwellers to connect them much more to the important rewilding that's happening beyond the urban space. This is our sort of long-term goals, to work with lots of different entities in different areas to connect mini forests in urban areas, to connect their communities to larger scale rewilding centres. Yeah, I'll rush through that because that's pretty much the same. So it's, yeah, the concept is using urban spaces, green spaces, as gateways to wider rewilding projects.